This tutorial is going to take a little look at how Creo handles your files and what's the best way of setting up Creo when you begin working on a new file or a new project. So we'll get straight into it. So as you boot into Creo, you're confronted with this menu at the top of the screen here, and we've seen before how we can create a new file just using the new file icon here. And by default, Creo prompts us to create a part file, and the subtype is solid. And then what we've been doing is entering a part name. So let's say we just want to call this part 01, and then clicking OK. And that's been taken us into the modeling environment here. So let's say we created some geometry in here, so we could sketch on one of the planes and create some solid geometry using an extrude or a revolve or one of the other features, and then we come to save our part file. So let's just have a little look at that. We'll open the file menu and just click save, and as you can see from the save dialog that opens, the location that it's going to navigate to by default is the current computer and the documents folder on that current computer. So that's going to try and go into documents for the current user on that machine, and then if we were just to click OK on that dialog, then we could quite rightly assume that that file's now been saved in that documents folder. So I have the documents folder open on this machine, and if we just have a look there, we can see that that part 01 file name that I gave the part file has actually been saved, so you can see it there, part 01. But then if you look at the extensions on the end of that file, we've got a .prt extension there, which we can assume refers to the fact that this is a part file, but then we've got a .1 after the file. So it looks as if Creo has added a number starting at 1 to the end of our file name. So let's just have a look what happens when we save this file again. So let's say we've been working on the file for a little while, we've been adding more geometry to the part file, and then we come to the point where we think, right, we need to save this because we've changed something about the file. So let's go into the file menu again and click on save again, and again it navigates to the default location, which is documents on the current machine, and we'll just hit OK there and just watch this folder for a second, and you can see that what's happened there is, rather than overwriting the existing file that it wrote the first time onto the hard disk, it's actually added a new copy. And if we were to click on save again here, so save and then click on OK, then what we'll see is that every time we hit save, so there's a shortcut to save here, every time we hit save, a new copy of the part file is saved onto the disk. So this is subtly different to the way a lot of other Windows programs and Windows-based CAD systems work. They tend to, as you hit save, what happens is the current copy of the file that's on the hard disk gets overwritten with the new copy that you're now saving. So it's very difficult to access old copies of the file using the behavior of most Windows programs. But Creo works differently. Creo, every time you press save, all it does is it writes a fresh copy of the part file onto the hard disk, and in order to allow it to differentiate between them all and not have them overwrite each other, it just puts a number on the end, and those numbers just increment by 1 every single time. So you can see they start at 1 with the first save, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 onwards, and Creo will just increment those numbers by 1 every time you press save. So what's the upshot of this? The upshot is that it's very easy to go back to a previous version of your file using the Creo system. So let's say that you make a mistake, and it's a mistake in the modeling that you're doing. So you added some geometry or deleted some feature that you didn't want to delete, it's quite easy to load in a previous save of a part file. So that's the plus side of what Creo allows you to do. Obviously there's a downside to that, and the downside is your disk space may become used up quite quickly, because especially if you do regular saves, which you should do just in case the system crashes, it's always good to regularly save your model, and that's true in any CAD system, but it holds true in Creo. But what that leads to is that the size of your folder that you're keeping your part files in will grow quite rapidly, and that's especially true if you're modeling quite complicated parts with lots of geometry in there. So what it's often a good idea to do is obviously to monitor how much space you have left on your storage device, and then as it starts to become a problem, as your free space starts to decline, it can be good to go back to very early versions of the part file and start deleting them. So in this case, let's say I'm 100% happy to lose the original copy and the 2 further copies that came after that. I'm happy that there's nothing in those files that I ever need to return to. I can hit delete in Windows, and you can see I've got rid of them. So yeah, that's the some good practice rules, and just an explanation of how Creo handles your files. So the other thing that we need to look at in this tutorial, if we just close this file down, let's say we come into the Windows environment here, and we know that we don't want to save our files into the documents folder on the local machine. Let's say we're using a networked machine and we want to save our files into a network location, or we have a USB disk of some description and we want to save our files onto that. Then the way to do that is, before you even start creating any new files in the system, you'll want to go to the File menu, go down to Manage Session, and you'll want to select this option, which is Select Working Directory. So as you can surmise from the name of that option there, what this allows us to do is to tell Creo to save our files into a different folder, and that can be any folder on the local machine. As I say, it could be a removable drive, it could be a network folder, it can be any folder on the local machine. And as soon as we do that and click on OK, any new files that we now create, so here's a new file, when we hit save, it's going to navigate to the new location rather than to the default documents location on the local machine. So that's good practice as well. If you're not the sole user of that local machine, then it's unlikely that you're going to want to save your files into the documents folder. So you'll have to do this every time you come into Creo. You'll have to go down to Manage Session and set your working directory to a folder that you want to save your files into.